Let's use this as a meditation.
Sing a song, sing out loud, sing out strong, sing of good things, not bad, sing of happy, not sad. Sing a song, make it simple to last your whole life long. Oh, don't worry that it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. Sing a song, let the whole world sing along, sing of love that could be, sing for you and for me, sing a song, make it simple to last your whole life long. Don't worry that it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song, just sing a song, just sing a song.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Woohoo! Awesome.
That didn't suck as bad as I thought it would.
That was just broke my heart. That is just the most beautiful song, and your voice singing it, Cathy, is just stunning. God, doesn't it bring back all those childhood memories when we're watching Mr. Rogers and it felt so simple? It's a perfect song too, because today we're talking about spiritual practices, and it's not about comparing the way you practice with anyone else's practice. So that actually comes up. I love how synchronized spirit is with us. So today we are talking about spiritual tools, and at this hour it feels like we have been offered a major reboot of sorts to assess our lives, and some of us may have been praying for this new way of being in a world that works for everyone. And if we want this new experience, if we want to have a new experience to come out of this chrysalis with a greater and newer direction that might be more beneficial, we're going to need to dig up the old tent poles and put them in the fire and walk ourselves unencumbered, step by step and decision by decision back into love. And if we want a peace, if we want a peaceful experience or peace in a warring world, we're going to be willing to sharpen the tools that will cut us free from stagnant and selfish ways and scarcity-based thinking. I think that's the number one thing that we need to cut ourselves free from, is scarcity-based thinking. I really do feel like we're in the time of the loaves and the fishes, where, you know, the more you have is demonstrated by what you recognize that you have and what you're able to give. So we get to put down our old distractions and lean towards a new consciousness with all of our weight until love lifts us all. And that's where we're headed, and that's where we are right now. And that's why a dedication to our spiritual practices and tools are going to be super helpful. So growing up, my dad had a lot of tools. I mean, the man had a lot of tools. He had so many tools that he had his own room for it. And his own spiritual practice one of his spiritual practices, and I shared this with you before, was that he would get all the kids into the van. I think he was trying to like get us out of my mom's hair. And he would get all of his kids in the van and he would drive us around the neighborhood and he would point out different houses and he would say, I turned them on and I turned them on. And what he was saying was that he connected the wires in their house and brought light and warmth into their home. I thought I was the daughter of a light worker, but I was just the daughter of an electrician. And because he was an electrician, my father had tools and he loved his tools. And this workroom in the basement was like his secret sanctuary. And the thing is, it was forbidden. Nobody was allowed to go in there. And it had like we only went in there on a dare to each other. But mostly it had all the markings of a haunted house. You know, first of all, it was forbidden. Second of all, it had this creepy door that like creaked and it moaned when you pushed it open. And then it had like years of cobwebs because nobody ever cleaned in there, and probably tons of spiders. And it had this one bare yellow jaundice bulb that hung from the ceiling. You'd think an electrician would have supplied himself a little bit better lighting, but it was just this one eerie. and then the room was filled with like these sharp edged items. So it would freak us out. I never had any real appreciation for my father's tools. But one day he began to bring the tools upstairs and he began to walk them out to the backyard, and me and all my 7 siblings began to follow him, gathering around him, trying to figure out what he was doing. And he took out his saw and he sawed some wood, and then he took out his hammer and he put the pieces together and he started building a frame, this wooden frame, and he laid it down on our lawn. And then he kicked up the mother of all tools that took up residence in our driveway because it was too big for his workroom in the basement. It was this behemoth chunk of metal. And when he kicked it up, it was like really loud, and it was the cement mixer, or as Will likes to say, the cement mixer, but that's not how you say the word. Everyone knows that. So the cement mixer, he began to create these batches and batches of the cement, and he poured it into the wooden frame. And we were like, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I'm building a platform. And when he was almost finished, he called each of us to him, and he took our hands and he pressed them into the cement like we were famous people at the Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. And I remember how amazing it felt to have your hand pressed into the cement. And every kid in my family got a turn to press their paw into the cement. And when he was done immortalizing us, we just stood around this amazing creation. And at that moment, that's when I had a real appreciation for why my dad cherished his tools. In the room, they were not really worth anything to me. I didn't see their possibility and their purpose, but in his hands, they could create the most beautiful things. And recently, my son has taken up sewing, and he started making masks. And he was hand sewing them. He had to make a project for school and he needed to sew this doll. And he started sewing a lot. So I said to him, like, hey, how about we get a sewing machine? And he said, oh, Mom, a sewing machine's like $200. And I said, yeah, but it would increase your ability to create things. It would probably increase your craftsmanship, and it would be probably a lot more fun to, use a sewing machine. So we got the sewing machine. And he's been sewing things like crazy. He started, like I said, making masks, and then he made a puppet, and now he's making this sort of half dress, it's like, who knows, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's cool. It's cool looking, and who knows what else he's going to produce from having the sewing machine. So the idea is the tools of my father and the tools of my son are not really magnificent unless they're being held by willing participants, the hands of a willing participant. And this is the same with spiritual tools. On their own, spiritual tools are just hollow suggestions, theory at best, but in the hands of a willing artisan, spiritual tools can help craft a life with greater ease and grace and beauty. And they can take us to places that we didn't even know that we could go. So what is a spiritual tool? A spiritual tool is anything that brings you closer to God. Anything that brings you closer to peace and freedom and joy. A short list of spiritual tools that you might already know and use are contemplation, meditation, prayer, chanting, yoga, tapping, 12 steps, breathing, breath work, making art. If you define a spiritual tool as anything that brings you closer to peace and joy and freedom, you'll find yourself with a rather eclectic spiritual toolbox, because there's a lot of things that bring us closer to peace and joy and freedom that we might not consider a spiritual tool. So you can use the suggestion from A Course in Miracles. You could take the spiritual temperature of any of the tools or activities that you're devoting your time to, and you could say, does this bring me closer to peace and joy and freedom? And as you take that assessment, you might find yourself prioritizing your list or reprioritizing your list. So I could go into the different tools, but really the way to sharpen one tool is the way to sharpen every tool. So how do you sharpen a spiritual tool? Well, the first thing is you use it early and often. Like Mary was saying, like she got hold of the spiritual tool, and the spiritual tool was like, am I doing everything with my divine? That's an example of both early and often. But we'll dip into early because early can have a lot of different interpretations. So early, it can mean, does it mean start early in the morning or early in life, or what does this mean? So it means start right now. It means develop your own spiritual tools and practices right now. Don't tarry, don't wait, don't dawdle, make haste to God. And do it from what you need. Like take an assessment of what works for you. Back in the day in California, I went to see my teacher, a spiritual guru, I'll call this person. And I asked this teacher, I asked, what is your spiritual practice? And I was in this big room of lots of students, and I was a young spiritual practitioner at the time. And I felt like my question was really earnest and sincere. I really wanted to know what their practice actually looked like. But the teacher just blew up at me. And this teacher, I'm going to divulge any information about them because it wasn't them, it was me. But they said, like, what do you mean asking me this question? And why are you asking about my spiritual practice? And how could you ask such a thing? And I just felt like the whole room turned on me, and I felt like the town idiot. And every time I thought about this moment, like I felt so much shame. And every time that this moment revisited my mind, I thought, like, what was the purpose of that? So finally one day I went to my own internal teacher and I said, what was the purpose of this exchange? And my own internal teacher said to me, Maureen, you're asking the wrong question, because you wanted the cliff notes. You didn't want to go to God. You wanted some tired old ass recipe that somebody else was following that was never going to work for you anyhow. And when I thought about that, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, I wanted to follow a path that someone else had cut with their own faith. That wouldn't be my path. So besides, even if the teacher had given me a really specific map, I wouldn't have followed it anyhow. I mean, you and I both know, you know, that eventually we'll think, you're not the boss of me, I want to figure this out myself. So, you know, this teacher couldn't win or lose, you know. I mean, if she gave me a map or a reprimand, still I was needing to go to God myself and figure it out on my own. We all must figure out and find the tools that work for us. So go directly to God. Do not pass go. Don't look for a middleman to get your interpretations. You could take a class on meditation. You could take a class on prayer. You could take a class on chanting, and that's all great and good. But sometimes the studying of something prevents us from the experience of it. Mark Twain says, we have not the reverent feeling for the rainbow that a savage has, because we know how it's made. We've lost as much as we've gained by prying into that matter. And what he's saying is basically what I'm trying to say is, don't try and overanalyze the way to God. Just be in awe of it. Sometimes our ego has us studying tools not to get closer to God, but just to say that we have the credentials. We master the process and to learn the chords and the scales, but we never actually let loose and play with God. We come at tools from this adult mind instead of a child. So, you know, Jesus is saying, be like children. Early and often also means to start now, but it also means that, you know, sometimes we want to wait and hold off, like we don't think we're ready. So don't wait till you're an old man when the sand's flying out of your hourglass, and don't wait till all your T's are crossed. You know, don't wait till you're ready. Don't wait to start getting romantic with God. Start now. The other morning on our call, we had this song come up The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, which is like the saddest song in the world, because it's about this father who goes off and forgets to make time for the important things. And we were applying it to our relationship with God. And what came up for me was like, don't do that. Like, don't put your divine on the back burner. And if you have children, don't wait to teach them. Don't wait to tell them, and don't wait till they're old enough to you think that they can handle it, to let them know that God loves them, that God lives in them, that God is available to them. Teach them early about their own innate power and perfection. As you teach, you learn. And give them the tools of prayer, whatever that looks like, in meditation and chanting and yoga. Expose them to different practices the way you would expose them to different foods. I remember when my daughter Billy wanted to take yoga. Actually, when she was really little, we had this dumb deck of cards with yoga poses, and we had some yoga mats, and my kids would just like pull out cards and do yoga. That's a spiritual practice, but to not make it seem sacred or weird, but playful, you know, to have your children play with prayer, to play with meditation. So that's another part of early and often. And early also means to start early in the morning, as soon as you get up, because the ego speaks first and loudest, and you got to get up early to get the spiritual worm. I don't know why you would want a worm, but anyhow, you know what I'm talking about. So that's what early could look like. And often means just exactly what you would think it means. It means give yourself 1,000 grace periods throughout the day. And even 1 minute of contemplation or a few deep breaths can change everything. Or a sweet little soft mantra like Mary was giving us, that God is my CEO. You know, it can be as simple as God is, or all things are working in my favor, or I'm in a romantic relationship with the divine. You know, and as you practice these affirmations, they'll become the firmament of your life. They'll become the underlining hum of your life. And when you get to experience that underlining hum of peace, savor it. You know, slip off to it like you'd slip off to a guilty pleasure or a good book. Don't gobble it down and just to get it over with. I once met a lady, and maybe you've met her too. She's out there. She's kind of funny. But she told me, I read A Course in Miracles. And I thought, what the heck does that mean? I mean, you read it like it was a book? Because it's not a book, it's a baptism, you know? So how are you gonna read something like that? A Course in Miracles is not pleasurable reading. A Course in Miracles makes you work, you know? It's a spiritual workout. It repeats itself over, and it's supposed to be repeated over and over and over. This is a spiritual tool. So in regards to spiritual tools, repetition is a thing. So make peace with the repetition. It doesn't mean that you're repeating and repeating and repeating because you're thick or dumb. It simply means that the ego is diligent, you know, so early and often, and also come hungry to your practice. When you come hungry, you know, I think when I was a little kid and my mom would, you know, take a lot of time to cook, and we'd all be really hungry. And when she rang the bell, we got there, you know, because there was 8 of us. You want to make sure you get something. So come like that to your spiritual practice. Come hungry to it. That means that you show up early and you sit in the front row. A lot of people say, well, I'm not really a front row type person. If you're not a front row type person, you're going to be left in the back row, and you're going to have a disconnected experience with your spirituality. And also that type of mentality that says, like, I don't want to get too close to the fire. I remember when I was in 12-step and my sponsor said to me, let's go away on a weekend to do the steps with these 2 master teachers. And I was like, hell no. I was like, I'll stay sober. You know, I'll work the steps. I'll do all this stuff, but I'm not going to be a zealot and hang out on a weekend with some teachers. And she was like, you know, just maybe pray on it. So that's the resistance that we all have within us. And that just walks into every room with us. And we have to learn how to erode that, you know, how to allow ourselves to be a zealot in our own practice, whatever that looks like. When I went to 12-step, I also got the message that I wasn't showing up just to get, but I was showing up to give. I wasn't showing up just to be fed, but I was showing up to feed. Everybody who's on this call right now, everybody who's here, is a teacher of God, is a spiritual teacher, is a way shower, is a healer. And my guru, RuPaul, likes to say, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? Can I get an amen? That's what he says. I've become a huge fan of RuPaul during this time. So, you know, so come to receive and come to extend. A good spiritual practice, whatever that is for you, will carve away all of your own plans and your own agendas and your own opinions. A good spiritual practice will polish the patina of the ego. A good spiritual tool will make you a hot knife through butter and reveal that shining state of divinity that dwells within you. And you don't want to master the tool. You want to master peace. So our lives can look like God's masterpieces. You want to use a tool of prayer or meditation or whatever tool you're using, not to be a master at meditation, but to have something more extraordinary revealed to us. We want to set ourselves on holy soil and experience the bliss of the present moment. And the tools give us a platform of peace to stand on. So what does that platform of peace look like? Is it like a slab of cement in your father's backyard pressed with fingerprints of innocent children? Which sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Believe it or not, it's more beautiful than that. It's more magnificent than that. The true gifts of spiritual tools cannot even be defined in words. Kyle Gibran says that words murder thoughts. So these rituals actually take us to what's real and beyond words, which is love. There's one section in A Course in Miracles that I want to close with. It's lesson 1, 2, 3, paragraph 6. It says, "Thanks be to you who heard, for you become the messengers who bring his voice to you and let it echo round and round the world, receiving the thanks of God today. And as you give thanks to God, he will offer you thanks to you, since he receives your gifts in loving gratitude and gives them back 1,000 and 100,000 more than they were given. And he blesses your gifts by sharing them with you. And so they grow in power and in strength until they fill the world with gladness and with gratitude." Whew, that's good stuff. I feel like sometimes I just take a hit off a bong, not that I do that anymore, but that's what it feels like. I can get that high on spiritual contemplations. And that's good stuff, man. So this is the direction of how to use a spiritual tool. How often do we use a spiritual tool? We use it all of the time. We use it until we embody it. We pray until our life becomes the prayer. We chant until our life becomes a song. We meditate until our life becomes a sweet stillness of peace. We serve until our actions become the dance. And we'll know when we arrive. When we arrive, we'll find that we have held on to nothing and somehow have been given everything. When our spiritual tools have carved us all the way back to God. That's the word.
This song is actually 2 songs in one. We did this on, when I first joined Jefferson Starship, we did a record of old folk songs, and it's not exactly an old folk song, but it's a mashup of redemption songs by Bob Marley and Imagine by John Lennon. I just saw the comment, Cathy's gonna sing some Cypress Hill now. Yeah, Insane in the Membrane. I may do that for my last song, but I'm gonna do this one right now. It also reminded me, the first song, the chords of it reminded me of this. So. Oh, pirates, yes, they rabbi, sold out to the merchant ships, just moments after they took I from the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Imagine all the people living for today. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Only ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Imagine all the people sharing there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living a life in peace. You're my sailing, I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Ooh, I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one.
Spot on, man, spot on. Wow, what the hell? Do you have like a warehouse? It's like, how are you a human jukebox?
Your life, that's all I can tell you.
Jukebox, man. That was amazing. Thank you so much. God, thank you so much. We usually do a little conversation, but we're gonna do a little meditation, just a short one, 3 minutes, you know, so we can practice a spiritual tool together, just so we can actually practice, like go directly to your divine. Taking in all the words, inspirations, ideas, the melodies, and the brilliance that has been offered up today, I just give thanks, and we turn within and take a few nice breaths, centering ourselves in this space. And with every breath, we allow a letting go, a surrendering of any fears, any control, each breath like a sweet salve to our souls, allowing it to fill any cracks or crevices of fear or concern, sharpening the tool of our consciousness, knowing that we have divine connection with our own internal teacher. We take a moment just to listen to this inner voice. It may sing its own sweet love song to you. It may give you direction. It may just allow you to experience the sweetness of silence. But whatever is offered, we know that it's the perfect gift for each of us. So we'll be in this present moment for 2 minutes, just practicing the presence, allowing your breath to come and go, and just being still. So knowing that this internal direction is available to each of us all of the time and continues to stay with us all throughout the day, I give thanks for all of the inspirations that have been gathered and all of the spiritual support that's available to us in the seen and unseen side of things. And so for this, I give thanks and I let it be. And we say, and so it is. Amen. Amen. Do you want to close with a song, Kath?
Sure. Although I'm not sure what to play now. Because I'm all sidetracked on Insane in the Membrane.
Well,
It's like yesterday. All right.
can you sing Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon? That sad song.
Oh my God. Yeah. Let me pull up a chart. Hang on a second.
The saddest song that ever was sung.
My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. He was talking before I knew it, and then as he grew, said, "Well, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. No, I'm gonna be like you." The cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue, man in the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when. We'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, "Thanks for the ball, Dad, come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?" I said, "Not today, I got a lot to do." He said, "That's okay." And he walked away, but his smile never did. He said, "I'm gonna be like him, yeah. You know I'm gonna be like him." And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy built the man alone. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when. We'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then. Came home from college just the other day. So much like a man, I just had to say, "Son, I'm proud of you. Can't you sit for a while?" He shook his head and he said with a smile, "What I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later, can I have them, please?" And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when. We'll get together then, yeah. You know we'll have a good time then. Long since retired, my son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, "I'd like to see you if you don't mind." He said, "I'd love to, Dad, if I can find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. Sure nice talking to you." Everybody say, "And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when. We'll get together then. You know I'll have a good time then." Woo!
The awesome thing about these community gatherings is that we get to continue to support amazing artists like Cathy Richardson. If you're not aware of her YouTube channel, get on it and listen to all of the songs. And thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to open it up to a little conversation. Everybody who's ready to leave can hop off, but if you want to share something that is near and dear to your heart, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll be able to chat about spiritual tools.